From Vassar College, this is Conversations at the Salt Line with Wesley Dixon.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Conversations at the Salt Line. I am your host, Wes Dixon, and today is move-in day here at Vassar. It's a really festive day, tons of happiness, tons of tears, of joy, and of love, tons of carts rolling around. So I say that because our studio is below some first-year dorms, and so if you hear some rumbling, it's not an earthquake, there's no issue, it's just the sounds of families and students moving in. But today, we actually have our recap episode for the last season of Conversations at the Salt Line before we jump into the new season of Conversations at the Salt Line. But given that, I thought we could go through some quick highlights of our last season's guests, their episodes, and just catapult us into our next really exciting season, which is already in production. So we had 8 episodes last season. I'm going to go through them one by one, talk about what I remember, and maybe you can think about what you remember if you listen to them as well. Our first guest was Chip Reid, Vassar alum, former White House correspondent, and we had a wonderful conversation about the time that he we actually talked about his book, Battle Lines, and we spoke mostly about his time being embedded in the 3-5 Marine Battalion in the Middle East. And it was an incredible conversation, particularly because we focused on the interesting combination of being both embedded in something, but having an observational perch, if you will. He was not a Marine, obviously, but he was really in the Marine sort of battalion in a way that most weren't. And it was an incredibly insightful conversation about his time in the Middle East, reporting on some incredibly difficult things. So it was grateful to have Chip here a year ago, and quite frankly, would be very curious to know what he would think about our current political moment at this point in time. After Chip, we had Dr. Liz Andrews from Spelman College, who is the executive director of the Spelman Fine Art Museum. She was here because Spelman and the Loeb at Vassar had an incredible collaboration where the Spelman Museum's art collection for the first time ever was on rotation, it was a traveling show, if you will, and Vassar was the very first stop for their show, and so it was a really wonderful exhibition here on campus and was here for several weeks. And Dr. Andrews was so incredibly insightful about the depth of material and resources in the Spelman art collection. And what sticks out to me, actually, is sort of our conversation about quilting in particular. And there were some incredible quilts in that collection that here at Vassar. And quilting was such a cool conversation because it, of course, sort of represents many salt lines. There's many sorts of pieces of quilts that all have different edges next to whatever the next piece of the quilt is. And so like a mosaic, the quilt is very cohesive, very cogent, very singular ultimately, but made up of lots of little diverse pieces. And so it was a really great metaphor for our conversation, but also for Vassar and higher ed in general. After Dr. Andrews, we were super privileged to have Liza Donnelly, a New Yorker cartoonist who was talking about her recently published book, which was a history of women cartoonists in the New Yorker. And it was wonderful. Liza was an incredible guest. She had the ethos of a cartoonist, if you will, which was wonderful. In fact, she actually drew a picture of me during our conversation. For those who are watching on YouTube, you can see this picture here. I thought she did quite a good job. She got my bun that I had at the time. I had a scarf. It was kind of cool when we recorded. I always have bracelets on. She got those. So I thought she did a good job, and it was a great sort of takeaway to have that keepsake from her. But what I really appreciated about our conversation was the attention to observation and the skill of learning how to observe and notice things in your environment, things that often people might not see. Liza, I think, prides herself in picking up on the stories, the nuances that are sort of under the surface, if you will, and her work speaks to that. So it was great talking to her. After Liza, we had Dr. Michael Gomez from NYU, a professor of African history. He was here for Black History Month, invited by one of our faculty members, Ismail Rashid, and we had an incredible conversation about his book, Reversing Sales, which really takes a wide view of the African diaspora and tells a much more complete story about the African diasporic community around the world that starts really way before transatlantic slavery and gives us a much more again, complete history, which I think people really appreciated hearing about during our conversation. After that, we had Elise Hogue, Vassar alum, class of 91. I know I should say this, the class of 91, Vassar alum in particular, are so prideful, full stop, and they're prideful because so many of their classmates have been on the podcast, and I promise you that it's not intentional. I don't mean that to slight the class of 91, but it just happens to be the case that many of your classmates have found their way in these chairs, and so I love shouting them out because they are big fans of the podcast because it is like free marketing for their class. But Elise Hogue, class of 91, was former president of NARAL Pro-Choice, and we had a wonderful conversation about the history of the anti-abortion movement, which I learned from her in her book, really started on the heels of the conclusion of Brown v. Board, and sort of her argument is the religious right was trying to find a new issue to hook themselves to build support around, and that happened to become abortion. So it was she had a well thought out, well researched book that we talked about at length. And again, someone else who, given the current political moment, would be so curious and so keen to have her additional thoughts on the podcast, and hopefully we can find a way to get them somehow, some way. But she was great. After Elise, we had another class of 91 member, John Wardock, who is a professional podcaster, if you will. He started his media career while he was a student at Vassar, actually doing all kinds of different local reporting for the newspaper and the radio station here in the Hudson Valley. And so it was so cool having him talk about the growth of the podcast industry from someone who was part of that growth, who facilitated that growth and made it happen, and thinking about the democratization of stories through podcast in ways that are different from other kinds of media forms. After John, we had Allison Abner, who is a Vassar alum, accomplished in many ways. I think the way that people might recognize the most is that she is a TV writer and wrote a couple episodes of The West Wing and also some Narcos episodes, which was incredibly fun to talk about. I actually had never watched The West Wing, which I said on the podcast before I spoke to her. I watched 2 episodes, the ones that she wrote before she came, but I was not a West Wing fanatic, but have watched some more episodes since talking to her because, of course, it's hard not to once you sort of have the inside scoop. But we had a really cool conversation about, though, was her balancing being a child and a practitioner of Hollywood, so to speak, but because of her family life and other kinds of things, being in Washington lots of the times, and finding it difficult. She said she found it difficult sometimes to exist in Washington, given who she was. But she told this very riveting story about an opportunity for her to use her Hollywood storytelling skills in a Washington context. And the particular story was about finding this young woman who was a victim of sex trafficking or other kinds of sexual violence, and really being able to convene the right advocates, the right sort of activist, and get the right audience and tell her story in such a way that people of high influence, the vice president and the president ultimately, were able to hear and listen to this young woman's story and start to make changes on her behalf. And so Alice and I had a great conversation about blending skills of different types to make those sorts of social changes, but also really being clear about the fact that she had to work at many salt lines in D.C. in order to make some of the positive changes she was able to make. So I was really appreciative for her insights. And last, we had Professor Beverly Gage from Yale University, who had just written and published a book, a biography on J. Edgar Hoover, one of our country's longest serving and most impactful, arguably, civil servants. And I so appreciate our conversation because she really complicated the narrative of J. Edgar Hoover for whom many people saw him as a very negative or sort of vitriolic, if you will, sort of figure. And Professor Gage wasn't saying that wasn't true, but she was adding much more context to his life, his personal life, his relationships, sort of the ways in which he worked with people who we know of now, Dr. King and others. And it was an incredibly helpful way to think about people and humanity and the complicated lives that many of us lead, and just gave me an appreciation, I should say, for maybe even giving grace to folks whom history in some ways is not written in a very positive light. So it was a wonderful, wonderful season on Conversation with the Salt Line. There's a couple episodes already queued up for season 3. We're very excited about that. And we love to take suggestions and ideas from you all. So any ideas, thoughts, people you want to have as guests, email me. You can find my email online on the Vassar website. But we would love to have you all be part of our process, and to suggest the stories that you would like to hear or the salt lines you would like to explore on the podcast. So stay tuned, clean your ears out, subscribe to the podcast, and we will see you this season. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you soon.